You're listening to The Switch. I'm your host, Stephanie Shaw. Hey, welcome to The Switch. I'm Stephanie Shaw. I'm a multi-certified holistic nutrition coach who, after finding no success with the 18 doctors and 2 world-renowned healthcare facilities I visited, decided I needed to make a switch and take my health into my own hands. Now I'm obsessed with you getting hormonally balanced and emotionally aligned. This podcast is about education, empowerment, and simple no-cost strategies you can implement right now. I'm so excited to be here with you to talk about all things health, beauty, clean living, and mindset. Ready to take your mind and body to the next level? It's time to make the switch. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Switch. I have a new buddy. Her name's Christy Martin. Christy, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Oh, Stephanie, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be on. And I'm really excited to connect with you again. Stephanie was on my podcast first. So it's just, we had a really great conversation. And so now I'm excited to be here talking to you again.
Perfect. We have boys in common. She has 5, I have 3. And I told her that I'm setting out a nightly visual for her and praying over her. For having 5 kids between, you said 15 and 9 in the home at the same time. Woohoo! Everybody send a word up for Christy. No, but I love boys. Boys are awesome. They're awesome. So Christy is a life coach and parenthood mentor who empowers women to navigate life and motherhood with more confidence, more joy, and less overwhelm. And we all need that. I don't care what stage of life you're in. If you're single, you need more joy. You need less overwhelm. So I know that you are going to give us some great practical advice. But it all started with your story. And that's what I want you to start off with. Tell us your story.
Oh my gosh, I would love to tell you my story. So like she said, I'm a mom to 5 boys. So I often just start out introducing myself like that. And that usually just makes everybody go like, oh my gosh, that's like the jaw drop moment. Like you can't say anything else besides that. And so, it's funny, but it also has really defined a huge piece of me. And I think that that's the case for all of us that are mothers. Motherhood defines and is a huge piece of us. Yeah. But oftentimes we just completely get lost in it, right? And we completely get lost in the other labels that we have as well. So I started out as a pretty young mom. And actually at the time, I thought I made it quite a while because my mom was, I think 17 when she got pregnant with me, 18 when she had me. And I was 21 when I had my oldest son. So I was like, hey, I made it 3 more years. Like I did great. And now, come to look back on it, I realized I grew up with my kids in some ways. I grew up with my husband. We've been together since I was 18. I was right out of high school. I grew up with my, oldest son. He's 15, like you said. And, all the things that we know nowadays, like the fact that like our brains don't stop developing until we're like 25 and, things like we're not really adults till we're, in our mid 20s or late 20s. And so, looking back on it, I just had that realization of myself, just, that I was really excited to jump into motherhood. I had just finished nursing school. So I was a nurse in our local emergency room for the first 8 years of my motherhood journey. So right after I graduated nursing school, I actually had my first son, a few weeks later. And then a couple of months after that, I came back to work, started my nursing career, and it was all over. And so, if you know nursing shifts, we were working 12-hour shifts, working night shifts, 3 days a week, lots of overtime available because, of course, people called in, it was busy. We could probably have a whole episode on, the behind the scenes of the medical world. But yeah, so in that period, I'm doing my thing, going to work. My husband's building his career and we're having kids. Mm-hmm. And we get to this point, we're at our third, and I was like, I think that we're like good. Like 3 feels like a good number. Like, and then before I even knew it, my third and my fourth are 10 and a half months apart. So 6 weeks, exactly 6 weeks. It it was like there was there was no time to make that choice. So we ended up with number 4, and then actually with number 5, I was on birth control, all of that, and then I had surgery. I had gallbladder surgery, and they gave me 1 round of IV antibiotics. And even being a nurse, I completely forgot that the effectiveness of the pill with antibiotics decreases, and nobody reminded me. I forgot, and a month later, surprise. So
Number 5.
yeah, surprise. So by the age of 28, I had 5 kids, all under the age of 8.
Woo.
So and we did it. Everybody always tells me all the time, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, I don't know either. We just do it. Like, you just do. That's all you know. And so we're chugging along. And then all of a sudden, I get laid off from my job. We had a mass layoff. At the same time, I decided it'd be a really great time. Well, I'm going to get gastric bypass surgery because I've been really overweight all my life. Mm-hmm. And then, and the same time, we bought a house that was, it's like 30 minutes away from where we were living, which at the time I was like, oh, not a big deal. It's only 30 minutes, but it ended up being a really bigger deal than I thought it would be. So anyways, all these huge life changes right around my Saturn return, if you're into like astrology at all. And I just really kind of spiraled from there. With the loss of my career, I'd really identified with being a nurse. So it was really just this like, who am I now? And then I'm just a mom. And that just didn't I loved being a mom. I loved staying home with my kids, but I felt like there was a piece of me missing, that piece that had tied up my purpose again in being a nurse, that piece that wanted to help people, that just wanted to share their bigger purpose with the world.
Right.
So I really kind of spiraled from there. After my surgery, I went about 1.5 years and I started drinking really heavily. Mm-hmm. That really quickly got out of control. I ended up in and out of the hospital just with a lot of health issues. I ended up in rehab. I ended up with a DUI. I ended up losing my nursing license. Ended up with an emergency surgery. And finally, at the end of it all, that was enough for like the rock bottom of, are we going to keep doing this, or are we ready to do something different? Yeah. Are we going to keep continuing this path, or are we ready to stand up and take a look at, all the stuff inside, right? Mm-hmm. Because I had this really big preconceived notion that like going into weight loss surgery, that as the weight dropped off, if I could just be skinny, like I'd feel good about myself. Everything would feel okay. I wouldn't be overwhelmed. Like I wouldn't feel so just not knowing who I was. That's really what it was. I just wouldn't feel so lost. And that wasn't the case at all. And, we've all learned that as we start doing the inner work, that's where the key is digging on the inside, right? Because I would still look in the mirror. And even though I was half the size that I was, that's all I saw was the bigger girl and the flaws and all the things. So, and all the ways that I couldn't handle emotion and overwhelm and parenting, and all the ways that I was using drinking to cope. I've had a really hard day with the kids. Let me drink. And right around the same time, my youngest was starting to exhibit signs of ADHD. And so we were starting to navigate, behavioral difficulties and wondering what's going on there. And then of course that's triggering me. And we're stuck in this cycle where I'm stuffing, using alcohol to cope, drinking till I'm blacking out. And we're just stuck in this cycle. So, once I got sober and I got outside of that, I was doing lots of volunteer work, dove into like volunteering with the kids at schools, just really dove into being a mom and really into figuring out who I was, right? Mm-hmm. Who am I when all these other things fall away? Who's Christy? And that really became my journey for the last 5 years. So I'll be sober 5 years. Geez, in like 5 days, the 21st. This is so weird. Anyways.
That is beautiful.
It's so cool. I'm like, oh my God, that's so weird. It's coming up. But um so it's, I see it as my journey as like clawing my way back, from that point to figure out who I am, to deal with the inside stuff, to address the issues of course, once I stopped drinking, then I started chain smoking. We went like to tobacco, outside the AA meetings, like nobody's drinking, but everybody's smoking, which again could be a whole nother episode. I digress. I digress. But, and so it wasn't again until we started getting down to that inner work, looking at why are we just hopping from thing to thing, to suppress emotion, to not allow yourself to feel, to use it as a coping mechanism. So that's why it became really important to me over the last couple of years to look at more natural healing techniques. So that led me to finding things. I started by getting certified in Reiki. I tried Reiki for the first time. That was one of my things. My declaration on my 36th birthday was, I'm going to try a new thing every week, whether it's just like going to a restaurant or whatever it was. And so Reiki was the first thing I did, and I loved it. So right away, I'm like, I have to learn how to do this. So right as COVID hit, is when everything got shut down. So we ended up doing the training online via Zoom. So it was her first time doing it, our first time taking it. So it was a really cool experience though. And then after that, it was just like, I discovered breath work and I loved that. And so I wanted to get facilitated in that. And then I discovered tapping, so emotional freedom technique tapping, and all of these really great ways for handling my stress, handling my anxiety in a really natural way, and learning about how it taps into, just the nervous system of the body. There's no, chemicals that are being needed to add for, quick relief of my anxiety. It's not turning to like a Xanax or something like that anymore. That's going to zonk me out and this and that. It's have all these other tools, and it feels so empowering. And
yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. And what I heard, that turning that pain into purpose is so amazing for me. And I often find that the people that are the best to work with, they've gone through something and then they're able to tell you their story and how they overcame. That is so empowering. And I know that you work in a field or modality called human design. And I want you to tell us about it. So I know before we get started, you guys out there who are listening are being like, isn't that all woo-woo kind of stuff? Christy is going to break it down for us so it doesn't feel as woo-woo to us. But it's really an important modality and helped you, I believe, as well.
Oh, absolutely. I love this. And at first, it's so funny because I had a really hard time explaining it in not a woo-woo manner. Like people would ask me all the time, what's human design? And my husband even got to telling people, he's like, it's like astrology on steroids. And that made me laugh really hard because I'm like, it kind of is. But I'm like, at the same time, I feel like that didn't do justice to it, Right. Like it really is a beneficial system. Beyond just kind of like having this information about yourself. So I like to really say that for me, human design was this system of self-discovery and like self-acceptance. So a lot of us know what the Enneagram is, what the Myers-Briggs is. So there are these personality tests that you can go online. You can find them lots of different places doing a Google search, and you answer all these questions, and then you're given, like with the Enneagram, you're given a number and it like tells you all the traits that you fall underneath, and the Myers-Briggs gives you a couple of letters, and all these different things, and they're both really excellent systems. And then you've also got human design. So this is a little bit newer. It's a little less known. And this one is a little bit more also than a personality test. It's really, it's kind of this dynamic blueprint of who you are. So where it does get the astrology influence is the chart is based off of things like your date, time, and location of birth. So it gets really specific to who like who you are in that moment that you came into being. So in that moment that your soul entered your body, in the moment that you're born, your chart is really detailed and showing kind of what characteristics were imprinted on you. So we can see different things like personality traits. So same as we can like with Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, but we can also see details on the energetic body. So like your human design type really talks about how your energy is here to like move through the world, how you're designed to navigate, what you're here to do. Then you have information about your nutrition. We can dive deep and you find out like how you're here to eat, how you're here to learn, what's your ideal environment that you're here to kind of live in, and you can create it around yourself all the time. What's the best strategies? And the way that I use it in my life and the way that I really started finding value in it, because again, when you first look at it, the chart's kind of a little overwhelming. There's all these shapes in the middle of it and these lines and these numbers are inside of these shapes and it has all these weird words on it. And so when I first saw it, I thought, this is interesting. I learned a little bit about it, but then I'm like, nah, that's it. My curiosity's kind of done with it. And it kept popping back up. One of those things from the universe, like it kept coming back in, kept coming back in, kept coming back in. It was one of those things where it's like finally like, okay, universe, I'm listening. Like, let me take a look at it again. And then it's just been like, woo, here we go ever since. But so just beyond being able to look at my own self and just really find self-acceptance of my own self, such as in the fact, I'll share a personal example. I'm a manifesting generator type. So manifesting generators are really just kind of busy bees. When you look at me, I'm just like talking with my hands, very kind of like dynamic. They're always kind of multitasking. When you think of maybe like a juggler, when I talk about all the different things that I incorporate into my program, I combine all these different aspects. And so that's like the epitome of the manifesting generator is they're very busy. They're here to do things. They're here to do them quickly. And they're here to just like create new systems. You give me just a second, Stephanie. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
What's up? Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
Let's give Mark a clean break.
Okay. And so, with all of that, I was able to, and also, at first I had trouble, like, what am I talking about? I hired a copywriter at the beginning of this year to help me pull everything together because I'm like, I like to talk about this and this and this and this. So you are a typical manifesting generator. So she's been able to help me pull it all together to make sense under this umbrella. And so that's a way that it's been able to help me in my business and my branding is we've umbrellaed my brand so I can talk about all the different pieces and hop around. And I used to feel really flaky about this because I'm like, I would be really interested in something and learning all about it. And then I would kind of get like bored with it. And then I'd be on to the next thing. Yeah. And so I would always call myself flaky, unreliable. Why am I always hopping from thing to thing? And it became a joke between me and my husband. My husband's like, I'm surprised you stuck with me for so long. Like, but you haven't gotten bored with me. I'm like, well, you're pretty dynamic and you flow with me. So it works. But I used to feel really bad about that. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be like consistent and reliable and like a normal person? That was my whole thing. Why can't I just be normal? And then once I learned that this is how you're designed, it's kind of like a superpower. It allowed me to really embrace it and allowed me to really be all over the place and just, when I do something silly or, when I have a habit of like getting in the car and changing the radio station. I'll listen to like 15 seconds of a song and I'll change it. My husband's like, I was just getting into it. And I'm like, well, I was bored with it. I'm ready to go to the next one. And so he's like, and I'm like, I'm a manifesting generator. He's like, I know. And we always talk about how like TikTok is the perfect platform for me because it's only 15-second clips or like reels. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. On to the next one. So all those different things just really allowed me to just kind of embrace who I was and have fun with it and accept it. But then also I started looking at my kids' charts, right? So not only ourselves, but we can look at our kids and our spouse and anybody that you have access to that information. Don't go digging through, their stuff, like their birth certificates, but like, get permission. But like, you can do this with your kids. And that's where I really love to focus is let's look at how, myself, how do I, am I influencing my kids, and how are they influencing me? How are emotions are a really big thing for me, because that's something I struggled with for a really long time. I have what we call an open solar plexus center. And so that's the center that kind of oversees emotions. And my youngest son has a closed one. And so it felt like every time we got together, I just would basically pick up on his emotions. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand why we would get together, and I would just get tense, and I would start feeling really kind of like anxious and frustrated. And, and I realized that, that's because he, with a closed center, he's almost giving off those emotional waves. And because my center's open, I'm picking up on those. And I think that's mine, and not realizing that I can let those pass through me. Mm-hmm. And instead of identifying with them and saying, oh my gosh, those are my emotions, I can say, oh, I'm picking up on something from him. What's going on with him? Maybe I can remove myself kind of from the equation and think like, oh, I know that's not coming from me. That emotion's not, but I also know he's got a closed emotional center. I just walked in the room and picked up on a lot of like anxiety or anger or whatever emotion it is. That's like an immediate clue, but something going on with my child. And I think that we get like that with our children, no matter what, whether right. You're like an open or closed one. We have this, special sense with them. We all have this empathic tendency with our children, but
we often just don't name it. So, and sometimes when you give it names like human design, or you start talking about charting and astrology, that's where people step back. But it's so connotation versus denotation is what I always say. But we always but there are things, so you can feel someone's energy when you come into the room. You can't, but being smart enough and aware enough and willing enough to recognize that, and then not allowing that energy to flow through to you, or allowing yourself to, again, recognize it and then try to change that environment. That's wrapped up kind of what you're saying, that, but you're just naming it. So I think that's how we can kind of get past some of the woo.
Yes. I think we can, and it offers so much insight as what I see in it. So I'll share one more really quick story. My youngest son, we talked about him, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Mm-hmm. Later on, when I learned about human design and started exploring more of it, I looked at some of the parts of the chart that might kind of correlate with ADHD tendencies. So things like he's a manifesting generator as well. So he's always really busy too. Like he'll be watching TV and like watching the iPad and like, playing, like he's doing 3 or 4 things at a time. And I'm like, how are you like watching all these things? And he's like, I'm just doing it. And I'm like, you know what? You're a man, Jen. Like, okay. Mm-hmm. Or just things like he has a certain gate activated. So there's different gates that are within the centers that have different influences and traits. So he can get really hyper focused on like the things that he loves, but then when it comes to other things, he can't focus. So what does that lead to in school? Not sitting still. They're distracted. They're disruptive. They're this. But if you set him in front of like some tools and you go let him take apart like a bicycle frame or something like that, that kid will be out there for hours. Yeah. You put him in front of a math paper and he's, playing with it and flipping it upside down and like laying upside down in his seat and all these other things. So it was just some really cool ways to gain insight on additional ways to work with him and like, how can I focus him? And just knowing there's so much of the chart. We could probably spend, again, 3 episodes talking about the different areas of the chart, but it offers so much insight when you, work with it and start looking at all the dynamics.
Mm-hmm. We talk also about emotional triggers and where do they come from and how can we actually navigate through those?
Yes. So that was a big thing for me. And that's something that I really like to talk about and work with moms as well, because I see this see this all too often. I'm going to share an example in a minute, but triggers are really kind of these emotional responses that we get. And it's from a memory that's stored in the body. It could be from a trauma or a time when you weren't feeling seen or heard. You didn't have a need met. It could have been from some time in childhood. Later on, you may not even know where the trigger is coming from. But it usually shows up in the form of a really strong emotion. So it could be anger, fear, anxiety, anything like that. So for me, we've been having a really big cussing problem around the house lately. And so when my child cusses, I immediately feel the tension in my body rise, right? I'm just like, oh, not in my house, right? And we start getting like that, like, who does he think he's talking to? Like all of this, right? And I look and I'm like, oh, you're triggered, right? That's me being triggered, because then I go in there and I'm like, wait, don't talk like that in this, and he's just like completely shut down then. And I'm coming from my wound of, let's take a look at that. Like, why, why does that trigger me? So disengagement has been a really huge thing for me of when I feel triggered. Oh, okay. I can recognize that now in my body. For me, it usually feels like a tension, and I kind of get that like, what? I think of like that. And so I'm able to like disengage. And so in that, sometimes I'll take a time out, because like with him, common strategies don't always work. And so I'll take a time out, and I'll take some time for him to get to a spot where he's able to talk, where I'm disengaged and I'm speaking from a place then of like, okay, I was able to look at my trigger. What was the situation I was dealing with? Why did it make me feel that way? Later you can explore that too. Like, was there a time in the past that like I got cussed at maybe as a child and I felt really unsafe then, and that made me feel really undervalued, and now that's triggering me again, and it's coming from my child, and how dare he treat me like that? And you see how we go.
Yeah. But the ability to recognize, or to teach people how to recognize those things, that completely changes parenting. It's so funny. As I said, I have 3 boys, so 2 are 18 months. So it's funny. I met my husband when I was 19. You said 18. We had our first kid, got married at 21, just like you.
Gosh.
You have 10 and a half months apart. I have 18 months apart. So anyway, the 2 oldest are 18 months apart, almost to the day. And then the youngest is like 10 years later. 10 years later. So, but it's so 10 years from the oldest. It's so funny how I parent totally different, because I like had that space, and I call them my practice kids, the 2 oldest. And I learned so much. So I was able to parent different, just like you're saying. Now by the time the 3rd one came, I recognized those emotional triggers. I had started to recognize like why I would get upset so quickly with a kid, like, hey, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. And then now I have a grandson, and he's only 3 months old, and already things will come up, or super tiny little funny things that you would normally say to a kid. I'm like, hey, I don't think I want him to wear that emotion. So I'm even grandparenting different, thinking about him not being triggered when he's a dad because I did something, to him. So I love the fact that you're talking about those emotional triggers, because they're huge and we don't always know. So something that may trigger you may not trigger me. So we don't know what is happening to that child, because they are a different human being.
Yes. I love that. And I want to share a quick story. I was out at football practice this last week, and I heard a mom getting really frustrated with her young child. She was a young mom, and I could remember being out there at football with my young children too, and my oldest were out there, and they're running everywhere, and they're throwing things around. They're trying to run on the football field. You're tired. You're trying to chase everybody. You're getting bit by ants, all these things, and you just want to like sit for a minute, and somebody's running that way, somebody's running that way. And I finally heard her. She was just like, get back over here. She's going and going. She's getting more and more frustrated. And then I heard her, tell her daughter, like, you're being a bad girl. And so right then I thought, ooh, and I actually jotted down a note in my notes because all the time I'm like, ooh, that's a really great thing to like talk about, acknowledging the behavior. So not that the girl's a bad girl, because now she's going to start taking on that identity of like, I'm bad. But it's that behavior, right? That behavior's triggering you. You don't want her throwing things at, um, people and running all over the field and this and that. But just really important to, even when you're feeling triggered, just try to remember that it's the behavior. Your child's not bad. None of us are bad. We're all here. We're all, inherently good. So trying to acknowledge like, hey, the things that you're doing right now are not appropriate. Like, you're not bad, but what you're doing right now is not okay.
And so I know some parents still, I think millennials are kind of, I give millennials credit every once in a while. So I think they're kind of getting it. Sometimes they're a little too soft on their kids.
Yeah.
I have to say that too.
Yeah.
But I think they're getting it, and it's starting to sound and feel a little differently, because you are right. You have to put the blame where the blame actually lies. And it's not that child, it's just that particular activity at that particular moment, because it's a kid, an hour later, they're going to be cuddled up in your arms, kissing you on the cheek, and you guys will be in love again. You know what I mean? So being able to focus and target that so that your response to it is appropriate, and they don't need us as coaches when they get to be 25. So
yes, I love that. And you feel good too, because then you're not left feeling like crap. That was always my thing when I would explode, or I would not handle the situation the way that, I wanted, or I'd lose my cool or this or that. Then we're left feeling really bad too about it. Like, man, I wish I wouldn't have yelled, or man, I wish I wouldn't have spanked, or this, or, whatever it is. So it's really good for us as well, not only for them, but for us too, and making us feel just better and more empowered and less like out of control, and just, that feeling.
It's a yucky feeling. So I know that you're the guest, but I have one more story. So my middle son, he is 29 now. So he's probably like 25 when this happened. But when it actually happened, he was only 9, and it's caught on video. So I was changing the baby's diaper. I was probably tired from work or whatever, and he wanted to help, but I wouldn't let him help. And I'm like, just go sit down, kind of like that. So my oldest son was videotaping his face when I told him, just go sit down like that. Mind you, this is from 8 years old to 25. So I didn't watch the video until he was 25. I sat here and bawled like a, he's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, look at your face. I emotionally scarred you. I put that on you. Like, it's, and I'm laughing now, but in all honesty, I feel like crying right now, because it's so important. I know we're like driving this point on, but it's so important what you say and how you react to things to your children. You don't want those emotions to be left on them. So I'll stop now. I'll get off my soapbox, but it's really important. So I want to go on. I want to talk a little bit about strategy. So we've already, we've worn all of the moms out. They're going to be like uber careful with every word they say. But it's all for the good. So what are some strategies around self-care?
I love that. And don't think you have to be perfect, right? Just we have all this knowledge too. And I still have my moments where I yell, or I don't handle something right, or I say something and I'm like, ooh, you shouldn't have said that. So we're all learning, and we're growing, and we're figuring this out. So absolutely don't beat yourself up if you don't get it right 100% of the time. None of us are. Right. But yeah, as far as strategies for self-care is such an important part too, because I found that out firsthand. Without, pouring into yourself first, like nothing else gets done. Nobody else is getting the nurturing that they need. And just, I've come to find that the rest of the household is really reflective on me. Mm-hmm. The moods of the children, the way things are going, the moods of my husband, all of those things, they become really reflective on us. And so no pressure or anything. I don't mean to say it like that, but I really mean it as an empowering way of like, when you're looking at like, oh, I really want to make some changes, or like, change can start right with you. That's anytime I've ever want to make a change with my family, I've started right with myself and watched as they've trickled along. That has nothing to do with self-care. So anyways, back to self-care strategies. Manifesting generator. So
we're reeling her in, everybody, but it's all good stuff. Come back to me.
So yes, so self-care, super, super important. We know this, we've been hearing this. So some of my favorite things is I like to, again, shake it up because that's my style. I can get really bored. I have like a loose routine. So I do have a morning routine. I'm up before the kids. I have to have like like about an hour and a half before they get up of quiet time. So I'm doing maybe a workout, some reading, some journaling, some meditating, but I always switch it up and I found different activities that I enjoy. So, it's always something that's really spending time with me, restoring me, getting me in a great mood. And exercise does that for me. It makes me feel really good about myself, makes me feel like, woo, energized, gets those endorphins going. Meditation can do that for me. Breath work is a big thing that I use. I actually use that right before our call. I'm like, you're really nervous before my podcast. I'm talking. I'm a huge introvert. And you wouldn't know that because it's like an hour later and Christy hasn't stopped talking. But, I do breath work almost before every interview, just taking that time to calm the nervous system. Tapping's a really big one that I can use for really quick, just self-care. Of course, I do the bigger things. It can be, stuff like the massages. I see that as self-care to help me with my body and with like pain. I see self-care as anything restorative that you love. Is there a hobby you love, like painting? Sometimes I'll just grab my cup of tea and just go sit outside for a little bit in the morning. And that feels just really good to me, just to look around and not be in the phone or, any of that stuff. So it's really about looking at like, what are the things that just really just make you go, oh, this feels good. It doesn't have to cost anything. Like you don't have to go anywhere, but what can you pour into yourself if you're not doing any self-care? Like what can you start 10 to 15 minutes a day of it just makes you feel good.
Right. I like that. I like also I want folks to hear, moms and dads or anyone actually listening, that self-care is not selfish at all. If you want to be able to show up for your friends, your family, your job, your kids, for whomever, even showing up for yourself, you have to find a way. If it's 5 minutes a day, 50 minutes a day, whatever it is, make sure that you're implementing some self-care. So I like those. Those are some great ideas. And I know that you also have the parenting project. So how does the parenting project support families?
Absolutely. So I love this. It's a really cool blend of human design. So we really take a look at the charts of the whole family and we look at the different ways in which everybody's like been designed to communicate with each other, the different ways certain family members might be influencing each other. Like I have two boys, every time they get together, it's like they always kind of explode. And so it comes to be like one has like a closed emotional center, one has an open one, and they have certain gates activated that like, clash with each other. So all these really cool insights, I go through that and I pull out these really fun insights. Then we also work on setting boundaries and structure. That was a really big thing for me as well, because I have ADHD myself. And so even setting things like rules felt so overwhelming to me. So I like to walk moms that are feeling really overwhelmed by doing something like that, or maybe are having a lot of discipline issues. I like to support on that as well, setting up a really easy structure. We talk about self-care. If you're doing self-care, how we can incorporate that. What support systems that you have, because that's really, really huge in your parenting journey as well. We're not meant to do this all by ourselves. Been there, try to do that. It never works out.
Yeah.
And then we also talk about the emotional part of it, because that was a huge part of it for me, was always being triggered, dealing with all these emotions and not knowing what to do with them, because I'd never been taught how to get rid of these emotions. I've been taught how to stuff them. Like we don't talk about them. We don't like we avoid them, those things. So I was really good at that. So, and I don't want to continue that cycle. So I want to help moms break that cycle as well, learn how to work with their triggers, identify what's going on for them, and then be able to turn around and help their children once they feel like they've gotten, you know, once they feel really empowered in their emotional management. So that's really what it's all about.
I like it. I like that a lot. So what we have a treat for you guys. So if you're driving in your car, I know you can't do this. You can just come back later and listen to this part of the podcast. But if you're somewhere where you can take maybe the next 2 to 3 minutes and sit quietly, we're going to do a mini breathwork session. I thought that would be a good idea because we're telling you not to take care of yourself. And we're giving you all these tips and tools. So while you're already here, we're just going to give you a mini breathwork session. And Christy is going to do it for us. So get us started.
I love it. So I don't have any music prepared, but we're just going to keep it short and sweet. You can listen to my voice. But with breath work, it is literally just using the power of your breath to help calm the nervous system, to help promote relaxation. With longer breathwork sessions, you can really access some really deep healing. You can really tap into like a lot of joy. I've had a session where I just like cried the whole time because I was releasing all of this kind of inner child work that I've been doing. Had another session where I like laughed the whole time and I was like, why am I laughing? Why am I like so happy and joyful? So breathwork is really cool about just giving you what you need. We're moving energy. We're using the power of the breath to do that. So definitely if you're driving, don't do this. Wait till you're home and you can either sit or lie down, let yourself be comfortable. And the thing with breath work is it's going to be not quite the way that we're used to breathing. So you're going to breathe through the mouth. All of the breathing is done through the mouth. And you start by first breathing into the belly. So instead of breathing into the chest like we typically do, you're really like breathing down into the belly, feeling everything expand. When you take in that inhale, you'll feel like the rib cage expanding, stomach expanding, the pelvis expanding. So if you can really feel into that, you know you're getting a really good breath into the belly. So I always say you want to pull in like 80% of that inhale into the belly and then about 20% into the chest. So it gets kind of this 3-part rhythm going on. So it sounds a little bit like this. So it'll be like hopefully you were able to hear that. But you can put a hand on the chest and on the belly to really feel the air coming in. So you're really going to feel the hand rise with inhale into the belly, a little bit of a rise into the chest, and then an exhale. And don't force the exhale. You just kind of let it come out. It may feel kind of awkward as first as you practice the rhythm, but just kind of do what the body naturally allows you to do. Oftentimes I end up off rhythm, but the body again has just this inner wisdom. It's going to give you just what you need, but allow yourself to just relax and start the breath through the mouth. Belly, chest, exhale. 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 And pick a rhythm that's comfortable for you. That feels too fast. Do what the body allows. Belly, chest, exhale. Doing great. So just keep up with that. Belly, chest, exhale. And so some of the things you might feel with that, you might start feeling kind of lightheaded. That's totally normal. If you're going to be doing it longer than a couple of minutes, you definitely want to lay down. I've only been doing a couple of minutes and I'm already feeling the calmness of it. So you can replay that, continue that as long as you want. You just keep with that pattern. Music is a really great thing to put on with it. Music can trigger a lot of emotion too. So kind of depending on what you're working through, put together a playlist for yourself and you can take yourself through that at a slower pace. You can take the quicker pace like we were doing. So that's kind of the beauty of breath work is it's you doing the breath, doing the work. It feels kind of awkward to breathe like that at first, but it's work.
It is. And it's actually, I've gone to like an hour session before and there's different rhythmic breathing to it. First, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. And then I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like my whole body felt this weird sense of relaxation throughout the day. I'm like, that was really cool. It like helped calm me down. So I like that.
It really did. So starting out, oh, sorry.
No.
I was gonna say, starting out, if you enjoyed that, start out with like 10 minutes. That's about what I did. And then you can work your way up. Especially too, the first time I did it, I hated it. My mind like wouldn't shut off. As like, this is dumb. You're not doing it right. You're breathing funny. You can't breathe. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And finally at the end, it was like, my mind just shut off and stopped all the chatter. And I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about now.
And so there's, make sure that you're finding one that's good and that's actually qualified, but there are breathwork coaches if you want to actually go through that process of learning how to do it properly. If you guys like take a yoga class or if you have a chiropractor or something, they probably know someone in your area who can help you. And that may help you actually understand what's going on in your body as you're going through that process. Cool. Yeah. So this was all right. This was my maybe little, I'm saying for some of my folks, this may have felt a little offbeat, but these are actually things that, so if you're trying to lose weight, there's so much more going on in your mind that you need to take care of. It's not just about the weight. If you're trying to get your mental health together, there's so much else going on. Like there's different layers to everything. So the things that we walk through the day are helping you peel back each of those layers so you can get to that healthful outcome that you're still looking for. So that's why we did that. And I have 2 more questions for you. I asked people 3 really. I want to know how we can get in contact with you. The second one is give us a takeaway, something really quick that folks can do at home for free. And the last one is what is your switch? What made you the woman that you are today?
Ooh, this is good. Okay. So as far as contact info, you can find me. My website is theselfprojectstudio.com. And then you can find me, I'm pretty active mostly on Instagram, and that's _Christy Martin. So I'm on most of the different social media platforms, either mostly under Christy Martin, some stuff under a Self Project Studio. I'm all over the place. But then as far as, was it the switch that I had to make?
Mm-hmm.
The switch that I had to make to really change things, was number 1 was telling myself, was I going to continue this same story because it's leading to a path that's going to lead to death. But the other thing was I going to keep telling myself the same stories? That was another thing that motherhood had done. It kept me from pursuing a lot of things. I can't do that. I have the kids that I have to take care of. I can't do this. So that was really for me, was I going to keep telling myself those same stories of why I couldn't do these things and I couldn't grow myself and nurture myself. So
beautiful. And what's the one takeaway?
One takeaway, I feel like definitely you'll be able to take away that tangible breath work. But the other takeaway is I feel like just to really remember, I say this a lot, we come here and we've not done this parenting thing before. It can be overwhelming. It's triggering. We don't know what we're doing. We're white knuckling it. No kid's the same either. You get it right with the first one, the second one, you're like, what's happening? I'm doing the same thing. It's not working. So you're never going to get it right. So stop putting so much stress on yourself, but also stop looking, I say stop putting so much of the stress of society and all the stress outside of you of like what you should be doing, what being a parent should look like, and how your kids should be behaving or how they should be dressed or what they should be doing, what their grades should be, all those things, right? All that noise coming in at us that we're like, I'm not a good mom because my kid's not getting A. My kid went to school today with holes in his shirt and his hair wasn't brushed. Like, all these things, like, just shut it down. And I really want you to like tap into yourself and the times that you're feeling overwhelmed and like you don't know what you're going to do. You're feeling triggered. All these things are coming at you, all this advice, all this criticism. I just want you to really remember, you know how to parent these kids, right? If you believe this, we all agreed to come here, together and to interact. Like they agreed that they wanted you to be their parents, and you're all put here together because you know how to be their best parent already. You just got to tap into that and you got to get really confident with that. So it's my long-winded tip.
All right. I love it. I love it. Chrissy, thank you so much for joining us today. I had an awesome time. Thank you for the mini breathwork sessions as well. Yes. Everyone, here's to your health. I am so excited for you because you just finished another episode of The Switch, which means you are the fierce person I already knew you were. If you're ready to join an exclusive group of other fierce high performers like you, a group where you can bounce ideas off one another and ask questions, be sure to join our exclusive Facebook community. You can find the link below.